As an art teacher, our classrooms are thought of as the place of joy, freedom, and creativity. Art teachers tend to be fun, funky, understanding, at least most of my art teachers were. In the art classroom, for me it was always a place where I felt the utmost levels of respect, ethics, and fairness, both from my teacher and from fellow art classmates, and this is true to this day. This image is of an ancient Kyros, or so it seems. This statue is a forgery. It's fake, and it took an immense amount of time, effort, and money to find this out. However, when art historians saw it, they knew within the first 2 seconds that it wasn't the real deal. They knew from their gut reaction that it felt off. They understood in seconds more than an entire team did in months. This ethics and gut instinct is something we use every day. A cultivated example is gambling, something I've never had the urge to do. You can either win or lose. You follow your gut. After some time you have experiences, you think things through, have a theory, and then figure out the answer you're looking for. This is how all of learning works. Sometimes we might not know, but we know, in the way whales or birds know migration paths to follow. We each chose art education, and we each have our own ethical compass to follow. We chose art ed, and these moral compasses are something that's key to being a good teacher and role model for our students. Students take on the personality of their teacher in their classroom. Their behavior, speaking, listening, maturity, and work habits is one example. Another example is the classroom environment itself. The best, happiest, and most confident teachers had the least clutter in their classroom. In a 2006 study at the University of Sussex, they found that there is a clear link between cleanliness and good behavior. Cassie Stevens' art room. Clutter makes students unable to focus. Chaos induces chaos. If you as a teacher aren't in control of your physical classroom, then your lack of control will be reflected in your teaching. As art teachers, this is a struggle. We have the most materials, things to keep track of, whether it's paints, exemplars, or student work. But our classroom also has the most freedom, which is a blessing and a curse. When it comes to the look of your classroom, keep the basics and then go for aesthetic. Keep extras like beanbags and fuzzy rugs to a minimum. I love a good shag rug, but think of the chaos if one of your students spills paint on the rug, leaves it there, other students walk through it, and then suddenly your classroom is in chaos. The first time you set foot in a classroom, you get the same 2-second snap judgment that those art historians got. You know if something feels right or if it's just a little off. This happens with everyone you meet and every place you go. I'm sure we've all had it each and every time we met one of our teachers. Think about the teachers that you have loved the most, the one you respected and changed your education. What was your first 2-second impression of them? As a teacher, we also have this with our students. Every student that comes in your classroom, you have an initial reaction of. If one little boy comes in having a very bad day on the first of school, and he might struggle to pay attention, it's hard to forget that first impression. But as a teacher, it's important for us to stop, think, and give our students the chance to prove to us how amazing they can be. Something I struggle with the most is fairness, dividing my time equally among the students. Of course you want to be with the one that reminds you the most of you or your close friends or family, but those might not be the students that need you the most or the ones that have something to teach you. Of course it's cliche to say, but we can always learn just as much from our students as they can from us. As a passionate teacher, this also means that you are passionate about your students' learning. Even if you weren't as thrilled to learn from a teacher yourself, you are passionate about the experience and the engagement of discovery, the continuation of those first 2 seconds and finding what lies ahead. This is the kind of passion it is crucial to show and pass on to each and every one of your students. We have all talked about in the past creating empathetic and well-rounded students. And now is more important time than ever to create students that are not only good listeners, but good citizens and people. Teachers have just as much responsibility to creating moral students with principles as they do to churning out little geniuses with perfect test scores. This ethical teaching isn't implemented directly. It is ingrained in our classroom practices and in modeling. Students hear the words you say, the qualities of justice, equality, respect, and honesty. This is a table from the Passion for Teaching. It shows the needs that children have and the responses versus temptations. If you model the responses, students are less likely to delve into the temptations later. Respect is something that I feel strongly about within the classroom. When I think back on my educational experience, the teachers and grades I felt the most positive about are the ones that the teachers respected me the most, not only as a student, but as a person. I try to implement this every time I am leading a lesson or interacting with students and teachers. So, who is your favorite professor right now? Don't say it out loud, but think of why they're your favorite. Being in the art program, we call our professors by their first names. They care about us as individuals, and they take time to understand our lives, not just our grades. This is an intimate form of respect that I have seen in our program and not in other classes around the campus. In our program, students and teachers respect each other's personhood, as opposed to respecting authority. I have found that this is a key element in positively leading your students through their education instead of just giving them work to complete. Position-based respect can get you a title or a position, but only time and understanding can give you the cooperation and love that an effective teacher guides their classroom with. Not to say that the positions don't give you a certain amount of respect. This is very true in some cases, such as armed forces or service professionals like police officers. But this type of respect can lead to a certain disdain and contempt. When you get to know your students' lives, minds, and hearts, they will get to know yours, which can make leadership and running a classroom a whole lot easier. When you are working with students who respect you and know that you respect them, the entire classroom climate can change. Your students want to succeed, they want to make you happy, and they want the same climate of respect that you do. Listen to your students' problems, take the time to understand, possibly help solve them, and then revel in the successes alongside of them. In my personal experience, taking time to respect and understand your students can make the difference not only in classroom management, but in the content they absorb. If a student respects you as a teacher, they will put more time into the class and understanding the material. If they know you respect them, they won't be as afraid to ask for help. They will be brave to make mistakes and continue trying. So, who you are and who your students are has a huge impact on your classroom environment. You guys are brave, compassionate, intuitive, empathetic, fair, strong, inclusive, ethical, creative, respectful, and your students love you too. Thank you. Okay. So I have a little activity. It's just a little ethics activity. I'm going to read some scenarios I found online out to you guys, and I want you to discuss them, keeping these 4 points in mind. You can start at the top, work your way down. That's a little better, like brain functioning wise, but you can do them in any order. So these are different ethical questions and ethics situations, and I want you to talk about what you would do in the situation, what's the issue, the different sides that people might take, who's affected, and then what you would do in this complete situation. So I have 5 cases. I'm going to start with 3, one that's a little easier, one that's medium, and one that's a little bit more difficult, and then if we have time, we can keep going. So, case 1. Lorna is an administrative assistant in the Human Resources Department. Her good friend Bill is applying for a job with the company, and she has agreed to serve as a reference for him. Bill approaches her for advice on preparing for the interview. Lorna has the actual interview questions that are asked of all the applicants and considers making him a copy of the list so he can adequately prepare for his interview. So, what's the issue at hand?
Giving him the list of the questions for the interview.
Mm-hmm. So, who would be affected by this, the different decisions that Lorna could make?
Anyone that is applying for that job or has been interviewed for that job, he himself, the HR, the interviewee,
So what are the different sides of this ethical issue? What could people say on both sides, giving him the questions or not giving him the questions?
You could say not to give him the questions because it could negatively affect the company and other people might be more adequate for the job.
Mm-hmm. What about the other side?
You could give him the questions because
someone like himself would view, like his side might be, I'm your friend, this is just you helping me out, I've helped you out before, which isn't fair, but
yeah.
That might be his side.
Mm-hmm. And then what would you guys do in this situation? So do you think you would copy the interview questions and hand them over to your friend, or do you think you would say, well, good luck, have a good time?
I think you would say that you couldn't share it, but that they should look online for like typical questions and practice themselves because they should be prepared for real life situations.
Yeah. Okay, so that one was kind of the easy one. It's a little bit more straightforward. It's an issue, but okay. So the next one, Marvin is a secretary in the facilities management department. He has just received a new computer and he wants to try it out. Though his supervisor has a strict policy about the computer use for business purposes only, he wants to learn the email software more thoroughly than his training can provide. One good way to do this, he figures out, is to write emails to his friends and family and relatives until he gets the knack of it. He's caught up on all his work and has an extra 30 minutes left today, and his supervisor has left the office. What should he do? So what's the issue at hand?
He wants to use his computer for reasons he's not allowed to use it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that makes sense.
So who's affected by whatever his actions are?
The company, yes.
Mm-hmm.
And him if he got in trouble for it somehow.
And then what are the different sides to this argument?
It's nothing harmful. He could just send the emails versus it could affect the company in a negative way using the emails, like for something that isn't secure.
Mm-hmm.
And for the positive side of it, it's also like just so you can learn the software better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. So he's taking his free time to do something he probably shouldn't be, but for the right reasons. So it's one of those kind of on the edge. And then what would your course of action be? Would you take that 30 minutes to learn the software better, or what would you do with that time?
I would maybe ask like your boss how you could go about this without like negatively affecting it. So maybe instead of sending emails to family members, you could ask him if you could send emails to him or
Mm-hmm.
someone in the company to try to test it out.
Yeah, I think that's a good solution. And the last one, and then we can do a few more if we still have time. Jeannie was recently hired to work as a receptionist in the front lobby. As a receptionist, she's responsible for making copies for her associates. Her son Bruce comes in and needs copies for a school project. He brought his own paper. He needs 300 copies for his class. If he doesn't bring in the copies with him, he will fail his project. The company copier does not require a security key, or they don't keep track of the copies that are made. So pretty much she either has to make copies for her son and he'll pass his project, he brought his own paper, or she doesn't make the copies for her son and he fails the project. But it's against the company's rules for her to just make copies for people that don't work there. So that I pretty much just identified the issue for you guys. What do you think is the key moral issue at hand? Do you think it's more that she wants to help her son, or that she doesn't want to hurt the company? What would you guys think would be more important?
Well, it's like doesn't want to hurt the company, but also like beyond that, maybe like doesn't want to get herself in a situation where she could be like reprimanded for it.
Yeah, I don't think it's like literally harmful to use that for that, but in her case scenario, maybe her job would be at risk, which would, I don't want to say it would be worse than her son failing, but maybe there's an alternative solution for her son.
Mm-hmm. So who would be affected by this? We kind of talked about this already. So.
The company, her son, and her.
Mm-hmm. And then we talked about the different sides a little bit already. What would your course of action be in this situation?
I feel like talking to someone higher up, like a corporate person, or not corporate, but like a manager, if you will, and like explaining, like, hey, I need these copies. I understand that I'm not allowed to use the printer for personal use, but could there be an exception, basically?
Maybe you could ask too, like if they could deduct the cost of the paper and the ink from your paycheck for what you're printing.
Yeah. So what do you guys think would be some ethical issues you might face being an art teacher?
I think you talked about favorites in your presentation, and I think that that's something we might struggle with because we only see our students once a week, and you won't see like them that much. So I think it's important to not to not have favorites and be fair to all students. even the ones that are the troublemakers, because like you said, they need the most help.
Even like with supplies, depending on your budget and what you have in your classroom, bringing those things home, like if I have children, like that's probably not fair, but then you feel like it's your classroom and there's an abundance of things and it would be okay. And also like the other side of that is, I don't know if this necessarily would be in that realm of things, but teachers who have a lower budget, like spending every last dime for their own classroom, like that's also an issue that could be hurting themselves financially or whatever. So that's kind of like finance based, but I know like talking to different art teachers that budget and supplies kind of has always been an issue for some.
Yeah, and going into that, similar to what you were kind of both saying, with I know like a lot of art teachers, and my high school art teacher had a big issue with, because people will be in Spanish and they'll need paint, and then you run to the art class and you need to just grab some paint, and so then people from every single class are coming and using your supplies, regardless of whether it's a project for your class or not. And so I think that's something that you really have to think about, and think about different ways to maybe approach that, because that's a hard situation, because of course you want them to have the supplies that they need for their other classes. Like, we're not careless, we want them to succeed. And similar to what Emma was saying with favorites, I know I got a lot of privileges that other students necessarily didn't when I was in high school, because I was like a good kid. Like, I got to, like my senior year, I got to literally like leave school at like 1 every day, because I didn't have class in the afternoon sometimes, and I would just leave. Like, I didn't have any other reason. So I think there's a lot of different things that you can go into with ethics and making those different decisions in the art classroom. And I think that it does have a lot to do with both fairness and respect. They all kind of intertwine, because if you're making these ethical decisions and you are giving favoritism or something like that, you definitely have to take both the respect and the fairness for your students into account. It shows, if you're giving one student favoritism, it's not necessarily fair, and it also shows the other students the different levels of respect you have for them. If you're favoriting one student, the other students aren't going to feel as respected or as respectful. So.
And I know some teachers struggle with, like, I mean, this isn't necessarily an ethics problem, but like using their own paycheck to buy their supplies, and that's also like a struggle that you would have to think about as a teacher.
Yeah. Okay.